I'd like to welcome up to the stage Marcos Garcia Norris. He runs the Crisis Management Practice Group as the group leader, and welcome, Marcos.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for making time today in this great venue. I run the Crisis Management Department for North America. So prior recall, kidnapping, ransom, terrorism, all those lines of secret business that we do in insurance. But I hope, and it's been mentioned before, you've had time to read through the Risk Barometer 2018. If you haven't, go to our webpage, download it. There's a lot of information there. And one of the points that our clients were talking about, and everyone who was involved in the barometer, was how they're concerned about the supply chain being impacted by political violence, by terrorism, by changes, how that impacts their business. So we'll be looking at those things today. Just to kick off, here is a map of the world prepared by our consultants, World Aware. But just to, I know summer is close, so you guys are probably thinking, where am I going to go? So we've actually color-coded this to help you out in your summer planning. Blue, go for blue, don't go for red. Blue is minimal political violence and terrorism. So if you want to escape away from the heat, how about Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, a bit small, but you know, why not? Something exotic, Mongolia, Bhutan, could be there. I know there's adventurous people here. How about combining South Korea and North Korea at the same time? Who would have said that's a low risk in terrorism and political violence? Or you want to stay a bit closer, maybe something tropical, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Belize. Those are the blue ones. Those are the low-risk areas. Most of our clients, when they're thinking about political violence and terrorism, they're looking at the green and the yellow. That's where there is some sort of activity, and you can see the spread around the world. In these countries, so you can see US, in these countries, terrorism has changed. So from the 9/11 big impacts, now we're seeing smaller attacks. We're seeing different types of terrorism, different types of violence occurring in these countries. So from mail bombs to active shooters, use of vehicles, different types of violence that, together with the use of internet, creates that impact, that terrorism. If we move into the orange and red, high-risk countries, so we can recognize most of the red ones will appear in the news on a daily basis. So we've got Afghanistan, we've got Syria, Libya, Pakistan now starting again. Terrorism mentioned to me before, so that journalists has been detained in Venezuela, US journalists today, so it's a lot of movement going on in the world. We've got the orange areas, and the orange areas is just constant political instability, different instability. There's a common denominator in all these color-coded countries, and that's the use of internet. Terrorists have adapted very quickly to using social media to increase their impact. It no longer has to be a huge blast, just a small vehicle used in the correct manner, and all the images that go with it create the same impact. So we've seen in the greens and the yellows, internet is quickly filling in the terrorist groups and the terrorist cells' need of larger groups, while in the orange and the red, we're still in the more traditional areas. So we use a lot of information which is sourced by our consultants, World Aware. We recommend to our clients, look, if you are going into a new business deal, international growth, you need to know where you're actually going to build your properties, where you're going to develop your business, and you know, the concepts change very fast, as we've seen. So get help from consultants who are constantly involved in this type of business. And insurance is a great way of getting that feedback. So we supply our clients with reports, up-to-date changes in political violence in the different countries, so they can adapt their strategies and preparation. So what does terrorism cover? I bet most of us in this room mention TRIA once or twice a day. I mean, TRIA is there. It's in every insurance policy. Since 9/11, it came in to fill in the gap of the commercial insurance. But what does terrorism insurance cover on a standalone basis? Well, we have the two classical points, which is first-party terrorism insurance, the building, the property. Something is damaged either through a blast or an attack. And then we have the third party. That's the liability of our insured against people claiming damages. If we think about a mall being attacked by a terrorist, was the security good enough? Or an office, was the security good enough? Am I going to get sued for that? I need to prepare my insurance just in case that happens. That is the classical terrorism. But we've seen, as terrorism has adapted, also the insurance has adapted and is expanding into different endorsements and coverages. So, for example, think of denial of access. Let's imagine this very stadium could be a target. If anything happens, we would be denied the access to actually do this event today. And I wouldn't want to stop you guys from getting the cocktail. So that's denial of access today. We could have active assailant, and we call it active assailant nowadays, what used to be active shooter. So the Vegas shooter now becoming assailant because they use vehicles, they'll use anything. It doesn't have to be a gun. There's other methods. We have event cancellation. So again, if something happened nearby, there was an attack or was a threat nearby, maybe we couldn't access the stadium. There's an event cancellation. If you imagine the concerts that occur, the games, all the sports activities, there's a lot of business interruption linked to that potential event cancellation, or even loss of attraction. So if you think there was a fun fair next to the stadium, something happens here, they're going to have to close down the fun fair, they're going to lose money, and nothing happened in their area. So all these extensions linked together in the new types of terrorism, and also cyber terrorism, the use of internet to cause property damage and bodily injury. So a lot of changes in the insurance world. But where are we going to? So I mentioned TRIA before. TRIA, so you remember after 9/11, it was a solution to fill in the vacuum of insurance companies could no longer quantify how to rate terrorism. All the insurance and reinsurance removed themselves from big buildings and United States exposure simply because it's impossible to rate anymore. We don't know how to calculate this anymore. So TRIA came in 2002 to fill in the gap. 2014, it nearly expired. For 12 days, it wasn't active. And then it was renewed. There was a bit of a rush at the time. The next expiry date is not that far away. So December 31st, 2020 is the next date. And I'm sure if you're reading about it, there's actually not much on the news nowadays. This is not actually being analyzed yet. And it will take some months to decide on whether it's going to be renewed or not. Does the market need it or not? Is the commercial offering sufficient or not? The important thing to think is that that's 2020, that's December. The months when that decision is going to be taken, there'll be an election going on. There'll be a lot of politics involved. And this is a big government solution. So how is that going to impact the decision-making? So that leads me to what we recommend, what we think you should be sharing with your clients. You've seen that the TRIA phase-out could come or not, but if it does come, will there be enough capacity? Will you be able to get that capacity for your clients in time? So it's time to start talking about standalone insurance, possibilities of TRIA phasing out, how much is required, and in what line of insurance to remove it from, and how much capacity they need on all their property. The important thing is, on standalone insurance, look at the definition of terrorism, a very broad definition. TRIA has never been tested. Since 2002, there hasn't been a single claim on TRIA. The best loss ratio, in this room at least, for 17 years, not a single dollar of losses. Not even the Boston bombings, simply because it needs to be certified, and it needs a minimum of $5 million property damage to qualify for TRIA. It hasn't happened. So a lot of the clients are going to say, well, do we need this, and is this the solution for us? So a broad definition for terrorism, an attack, political, religious, or ideological, that covers without anyone else needing to certify it. At the same time, one that's going to offer a local policy, and an international solution, because TRIA does not offer coverage outside US. So that, in a nutshell, is where we are on the terrorism side.